Marcus Chen sat in the corner of the Galactic Council's waiting chamber, his hands folded quietly in his lap. Around him, representatives from dozens of alien species filled the vast crystalline hall with their chatter, posturing, and displays of power. The Zephyrian delegates flexed their metallic wings while discussing their latest military conquests. The Korath delegation stomped their massive feet, making the floor vibrate with each step as they boasted about their industrial might. The ethereal Valens floated above everyone else, their translucent forms shimmering as they spoke in harmonious tones about their psychic abilities. Marcus remained still, observing everything with dark, patient eyes. His simple black suit stood out starkly against the elaborate ceremonial garments, bioluminescent displays, and exotic technologies worn by the other representatives. To most observers, he looked unremarkable, perhaps even weak. The humans had only recently been granted a seat on the council, and many species viewed them as barely evolved primates who had stumbled upon space travel through sheer luck. "Look at the little Earth creature," whispered Ambassador Thractor, a towering Korath whose rocky hide could deflect plasma bolts. His voice rumbled like distant thunder, causing several smaller species to step back nervously. "Sitting there like a frightened animal. I wonder if it even understands where it is." The Zephyrian war commander Velsha clicked her razor-sharp talons against her ceremonial armor. Her species had conquered 17 star systems in the past century, and she wore trophies from each victory across her chest. The humans barely qualify as a spacefaring civilization. Their ships are crude metal constructs held together with primitive fusion drives. I've seen asteroids with better defensive capabilities. Marcus heard every word, but his expression never changed. He had learned long ago that silence often revealed more about one's opponents than any amount of questioning could. His stillness wasn't born of fear or uncertainty, but from a discipline that few species in the galaxy understood. Where others saw weakness, Marcus saw opportunity. The Valon Collective's primary speaker, a being known as Whisper of Storms, drifted closer to examine the human representative. Its form shifted like liquid light as it communicated telepathically with its companions. "This one's mind is peculiar. There are layers we cannot penetrate. Unusual for such a primitive species." "Primitive indeed," scoffed Chancellor Zoreth of the Hegemony, his forearms gesturing dismissively. The Hegemony controlled the largest trade routes in this sector of the galaxy, and Zoreth wore his wealth like armor. Precious metals from 100 worlds adorned his elaborate robes. "Humans have no significant military fleet, no valuable resources worth mentioning, and no advanced technology to offer. I question why they were granted council membership at all." The conversation continued around Marcus, as if he weren't there, which suited him perfectly. He watched how each species interacted with the others, noting alliances, rivalries, and the subtle power dynamics that governed galactic politics. The Korath valued raw strength above all else, settling disputes through trial by combat. The Zephyrians respected military prowess and territorial expansion. The Valons prized psychic ability and mental discipline. The Hegemony measured worth in economic terms and technological advancement. Each species believed their way was superior, and each looked down upon humanity as inferior in every meaningful category. What they didn't understand was that humans had spent millennia perfecting something far more dangerous than any individual strength: adaptability. Marcus had been chosen as Earth's representative not because he was the strongest, fastest, or smartest human, but because he possessed a quality that made him uniquely suited for this role. He had spent 15 years in Earth's most dangerous conflicts, not as a soldier, but as something much more valuable. While other species celebrated their warriors and champions, humans had learned to value those who could end conflicts before they truly began. The massive doors to the council chamber began to open with a deep, resonating hum that silenced all conversation. Each species moved toward their designated seating areas according to strict protocol established over thousands of years. The Korath took positions near the chamber's center, their size and aggression earning them prominent placement. The Zephyrians arranged themselves in a precise military formation to the right. The Velans floated in a loose cluster that somehow managed to maintain perfect symmetry. The hegemony occupied an elevated platform that allowed them to look down upon the other delegates. Marcus walked calmly to the human section, a small area tucked away in what most species would consider the least prestigious location in the chamber. The seating arrangement itself was a message about humanity's perceived place in the galactic hierarchy. Other delegates either ignored him completely or watched him with barely concealed amusement, like adults observing a child who had wandered into an important business meeting. As he settled into his chair, Marcus caught fragments of conversation from nearby delegates. The topics ranged from territorial disputes in the Outer Rim to trade negotiations involving rare minerals found only in the Andromeda approach. Each discussion carried undertones of threat and posturing, with various species making subtle references to their military capabilities or economic leverage. "The Korath expansion into Sector 7 continues unopposed," rumbled Ambassador Thraktor to his aide. "The mining colonies there will provide enough raw materials to double our fleet production within 5 standard years." War Commander Velshaw's response carried a sharp edge. "Those mining rights were promised to the Zephyrian Empire under the Kratos Agreement. Any attempt to claim them will be met with appropriate force." The tension in the chamber increased noticeably as these two military powers faced off, even indirectly. Several smaller species shifted nervously, knowing that a conflict between the Korath and Zephyrians would likely drag multiple systems into war. The Valens began to glow more brightly, their collective consciousness apparently engaged in rapid internal discussion. The hegemony representatives exchanged meaningful glances, probably calculating how such a conflict might affect their trade routes. Marcus observed all of this with the same calm expression he had maintained since arriving. His training had taught him to recognize the signs of impending violence long before others even realized conflict was approaching. The way Thraktor's rocky plates had shifted slightly, indicating increased muscle tension. The subtle change in Velshaw's breathing pattern that suggested she was preparing for combat. The almost imperceptible darkening of the Velan's forms that occurred when they were considering aggressive action. Most concerning was what he didn't see. None of these species appeared to have any real interest in preventing conflict. They seemed to view war as inevitable, even desirable. Their entire approach to diplomacy was based on demonstrating superior force rather than finding mutually beneficial solutions. High Counselor Nexus, an ancient being whose species had founded the Galactic Council millennia ago, finally called for order. Its voice carried a harmonic quality that seemed to resonate in every delegate's bones, regardless of their species' auditory anatomy. "We gather today to address the growing instability in the Outer Rim territories. Recent events have disrupted established trade routes and threatened the peace that has existed for nearly 2 centuries. Marcus knew the High Counselor was referring to a series of conflicts that had been escalating for months. Pirate raids, territorial disputes, and resource shortages had created a cascade of problems affecting multiple star systems. What most species didn't realize was that these seemingly separate incidents were all connected, part of a larger pattern that suggested coordinated aggression by an unknown force. "The hegemony proposes increased security patrols throughout the affected regions," announced Chancellor Zorith, his multiple arms moving in complex gestures that conveyed both respect for the High Counselor and subtle disdain for his fellow delegates. "Our merchant fleets carry the most advanced sensor arrays available. We can provide early warning of any suspicious activity." War Commander Velshaw's talons scraped against her armor as she responded. "Security patrols accomplish nothing without the force to back them up. The Zephyrian fleet stands ready to eliminate any threats to galactic stability. We have successfully pacified 17 systems using proven military tactics. Ambassador Thraktor's laugh sounded like rocks grinding together. Pacification through destruction is not a solution. The Korath way is more direct. We challenge these unknown aggressors to face us in honorable combat. Let strength determine the outcome. The Velan Collective's response came as a harmonious chorus from multiple speakers. Violence begets violence. We propose a telepathic investigation to identify the true source of these disturbances. Mental interrogation of captured pirates would reveal their coordinators quickly. Each proposal reflected the suggesting species' fundamental approach to problem-solving, and each carried obvious flaws. The hegemony's surveillance networks could gather information, but offered no means of acting on it. The Zephyrian military solution would likely create more problems than it solved, turning limited conflicts into widespread warfare. The Korath's challenge-based approach assumed their enemies would fight honorably, a dangerous assumption when dealing with pirates and terrorists. The Velan telepathic investigation might work on individuals, but would be useless against any adversary sophisticated enough to use mental shields or mind wipes. Marcus listened to 20 minutes of increasingly heated debate before finally speaking. His voice was quiet, but something in its tone caused the entire chamber to fall silent. Has anyone considered that we might be looking at this problem backwards? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Several delegates turned to stare at the human representative, apparently surprised that he had spoken at all. High Counselor Nexus gestured for him to continue, its ancient eyes reflecting a curiosity that hadn't been present during the previous discussions. Every proposal assumes we need to react to these incidents, Marcus continued, his tone remaining calm and measured. But reactive strategies only work if you can predict your opponent's next move. What if the real question isn't how to respond, but why these specific targets were chosen in the first place? War Commander Velshaw's irritation was evident in the way her wings shifted. The targets are obvious: trade routes, mining colonies, communication relays, standard pirate objectives. Marcus nodded slowly as if considering her point. That's what it looks like on the surface. But effective pirates choose targets based on maximum reward for minimum risk. These attacks have been hitting hardened targets that require significant resources to assault successfully. The risk-reward ratio doesn't make sense unless there's a larger objective we're not seeing. Chancellor Zorith's 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with new interest. The hegemony had become wealthy by understanding the economics of conflict better than most species. You're suggesting these aren't independent pirate raids? I'm suggesting that maybe we're dealing with someone who understands our response patterns better than we realize, Marcus replied. Every time we reinforce one area, attacks shift to another. Every time we adapt our patrol routes, they've already moved to new targets. That level of coordination requires either incredible luck or detailed intelligence about our defensive strategies. The chamber fell silent as delegates began to consider the implications. If Marcus was right, they weren't dealing with random piracy, but with an organized intelligence operation designed to probe galactic defenses. Such an operation would require resources, planning, and most importantly, inside information about Council military deployments. Ambassador Thraktor's rocky plates shifted as he processed this possibility. You're implying that someone within the Council is providing information to these attackers. Marcus met the Korath ambassador's gaze without flinching. I'm not implying anything. I'm observing that our current approaches aren't working, and suggesting that maybe we need to understand our opponent before we can defeat them. High Counselor Nexus leaned forward, its ancient features showing the first real interest Marcus had seen during the session. What would you propose, Representative Chen? For the first time since entering the chamber, Marcus allowed a slight smile to cross his face. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I propose we stop trying to match strength with strength and start using what humans do best." "And what exactly do humans do best?" asked Whisper of Storms, the Valen's form shimmering with curiosity. Marcus's smile didn't change, but something in his eyes grew colder. "We adapt. And when adaptation isn't enough." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "We become something our enemies never see coming." The chamber remained silent for several long moments as delegates processed the human's words. Most species measured their worth by their greatest strengths, their most obvious advantages. But Marcus's statement suggested something different, something that made many representatives suddenly reconsider their dismissive attitudes toward humanity. High Counselor Nexus finally broke the silence. "The Council will consider all proposals. This session is adjourned pending further investigation." As delegates began filing out of the chamber, several approached Marcus with newfound respect, but he barely noticed their attention. His mind was already working on the problem, analyzing patterns and possibilities with the same methodical precision that had once made him one of Earth's most effective specialists. What the other delegates didn't know was that Marcus Chen had spent the first 35 years of his life perfecting a very specific skill set. He wasn't a diplomat, though he could negotiate when necessary. He wasn't a soldier, though he could fight when required. He wasn't a scientist, though he understood technology better than most. Marcus Chen was something much rarer and far more dangerous. He was what humans called a problem solver, someone who specialized in making impossible situations disappear completely. And he was beginning to suspect that the Outer Rim conflicts were about to become a very solvable problem. The other delegates filed out of the chamber, most of them still viewing the quiet human as an insignificant addition to their prestigious council. None of them realized that they had just met someone who would fundamentally change their understanding of what it meant to be dangerous in a galaxy full of powerful species. Marcus remained in his seat until the chamber was empty, his dark eyes fixed on nothing as his mind began to work. Somewhere in the Outer Rim, someone was playing a complex game with the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. They had made one critical mistake, though. They had attracted the attention of humanity, and humanity had sent Marcus Chen to solve the problem. 3 days after the council session, Marcus Chen stood in the observation deck of the GSV Harmony, a massive diplomatic vessel that served as a mobile meeting point for interspecies negotiations. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he watched the swirling storms of the gas giant Tempest Prime, where the Council had agreed to establish a temporary command center for investigating the Outer Rim incidents. The other delegates had insisted on bringing their finest vessels, each a testament to their species' technological and military capabilities. The Korath had arrived in a kilometer-long dreadnought whose hull was covered in battle scars from their countless wars. The Zephyrians brought their pride, the Stormclaw, a sleek predator of a ship designed for speed and devastating strikes. The Valen Collective traveled in something that looked more like a crystal cathedral than a spacecraft, its surfaces shifting with patterns that hurt to look at directly. The Hegemony's contribution was a mobile trade station the size of a small moon, bristling with defensive systems and sensor arrays. Humanity's contribution to this impressive fleet was the Persistence, a modest exploration vessel that most delegates had mistaken for a support craft when it first arrived. Its hull was a plain gray metal, unmarked except for Earth's simple blue and green emblem. No weapons were visible on its surface, no impressive defensive shields shimmered around its form. To most observers, it looked exactly like what they expected from humanity. Unremarkable, probably inadequate, and certainly not threatening. Marcus had deliberately chosen the Persistence for exactly those reasons. "Representative Chen," came a voice behind him. He turned to see Dr. Sarah Voss, the ship's chief science officer and one of only 3 other humans aboard the vessel. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus could read the concern in her eyes. The other delegations are requesting updates on our investigation progress. Marcus nodded slowly. Over the past 72 hours, he had been conducting what the other species believed was a standard intelligence analysis of the Outer Rim attacks. What they didn't realize was that Marcus's investigation had already reached conclusions that would fundamentally alter their understanding of the threat they faced. "Have our guests found anything useful?" he asked. Dr. Voss consulted her tablet. "The Korath battle analysis suggests the attacks are being carried out by a previously unknown warrior culture seeking to establish territorial claims through combat. They're recommending immediate military response to accept the challenge. The Zephyrians? War Commander Velshaw believes we're dealing with a rogue military force using stolen technology. Her tactical analysis indicates the attackers are testing our response times and defensive capabilities, possibly preparing for a larger offensive. She wants to deploy hunter squadrons to track down their base." Marcus gestured for her to continue. "The Vaylans report significant psychic interference around the attack sites, suggesting the use of mental manipulation technology. They believe the attackers might be using mind control to turn victims against each other before moving in to claim territory." "And the hegemony?" Dr. Voss's expression grew slightly troubled. "Chancellor Zorith's economic analysis suggests the attacks are designed to disrupt specific trade routes in order to artificially inflate the value of alternative shipping lanes. He thinks we're dealing with an economic conspiracy rather than military aggression." Marcus turned back to the window, watching the storms rage across Tempest Prime's surface. Each delegation had interpreted the evidence through the lens of their own cultural priorities, which was exactly what he had expected. Military cultures saw military threats. Economic powers saw economic manipulation. Psychic species assumed psychic interference. All of them were missing the real pattern. "What about our analysis?" Dr. Voss asked quietly. Marcus was silent for a long moment. The truth was that his investigation had uncovered something far more disturbing than random piracy or territorial expansion. The attacks weren't designed to claim territory, disrupt trade, or test military responses. They were something much more sophisticated and infinitely more dangerous. "Schedule a meeting with all delegation heads for tomorrow morning," he said finally. "It's time to share what we've learned." Dr. Voss hesitated. "Are you sure? Some of our conclusions are going to be difficult for them to accept." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew colder. "Dr. Voss, in approximately 18 hours, someone is going to launch an attack that will make everything we've seen so far look like minor harassment. If we don't act before then, we're going to discover just how unprepared the galaxy is for this kind of threat." The next morning found Marcus standing before the assembled delegation heads in the Harmony's main conference chamber. The room had been designed to accommodate multiple species comfortably, with adjustable gravity fields, atmosphere controls, and seating configurations that could adapt to radically different physiologies. Ambassador Thraktor dominated one side of the chamber, his massive rocky form requiring specially reinforced furniture. War Commander Velshaw perched on a raised platform that allowed her to spread her metallic wings while remaining seated. The Veylan representatives floated in a loose formation near the chamber's center, their translucent forms casting strange shadows on the walls. Chancellor Zorith had arranged his delegation on an elevated tier that positioned them above the other representatives. Marcus stood at the chamber's focus point, a simple podium that rose from the floor like a natural formation. His appearance remained as unremarkable as ever. The same plain black suit, the same calm expression, the same patient stillness that had characterized his presence since arriving at the council. "Over the past 3 days," he began, "each of our delegations has conducted independent analysis of the Outer Rim incidents. Your reports have been thorough and professional, and each has identified legitimate aspects of the threat we're facing. Polite acknowledgments came from around the chamber. Marcus could sense that most delegates expected a standard diplomatic summary, followed by some kind of compromise solution that incorporated elements from each species' recommendations. However, Marcus continued, I believe we've all been looking at the wrong question. The chamber fell silent. War Commander Velshaw's wings shifted slightly, a sign of increased attention among her species. Ambassador Thraktor's rocky plates ground together almost inaudibly. The Velan's forms began to shimmer more intensely. We've been asking how to respond to these attacks, Marcus said, but the real question is why someone wanted us to have this meeting. Chancellor Zorith was the first to respond, his four arms moving in gestures of confusion. Representative Chen, I'm not sure I understand your meaning. Marcus touched a control on his podium, and a holographic display filled the chamber's center. The image showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with hundreds of red indicators marking the locations of recent attacks. Every incident we've investigated has followed a specific pattern, he explained, not in terms of targets or tactics, but in terms of information distribution. Each attack was discovered and reported through channels that ensured specific pieces of information reached specific species. The hologram shifted, showing data streams flowing from attack sites to various civilizations. Different colored lines represented different types of intelligence, military assessments going to warrior cultures, economic data reaching trade-focused species, psychic anomalies being reported to telepathic civilizations. The Korath received reports emphasizing the combat capabilities of the attackers, Marcus continued. The Zephyrians got tactical analysis suggesting military organization. The Velans detected psychic interference. The hegemony discovered economic disruption patterns. Each of you received exactly the type of information that would lead to the conclusions your species naturally reaches. War Commander Velshaw's talons scraped against her perch. You're suggesting someone wanted us to analyze these attacks? I'm suggesting someone wanted us to be sitting in this room right now, having this conversation. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Marcus could see understanding beginning to dawn on several faces as delegates realized they might be dealing with an intelligence that understood galactic politics better than they did. Ambassador Thraktor's voice rumbled with barely controlled anger. If what you're saying is true, then we've been manipulated like cubs, learning their first battle strategies. It gets worse, Marcus said quietly. He touched another control, and the holographic display changed to show a real-time tactical overview of the current system. Ships from 5 different species floated in loose formation around Tempest Prime, their combined firepower representing a significant portion of the galaxy's military strength. 18 hours ago, I asked our ship's AI to run a predictive analysis based on historical attack patterns. If the perpetrators maintain their current schedule and escalation curve, their next target should be struck in approximately... He checked his chronometer, 4 hours and 23 minutes. The chamber erupted in questions and demands for clarification, but Marcus raised a hand for silence. The target is this fleet. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees as the full scope of what Marcus was suggesting became clear. Someone hadn't just been probing galactic defenses or disrupting trade routes. They had been maneuvering the galaxy's most powerful military forces into a single location where they could all be eliminated simultaneously. Chancellor Zorith's multiple arms moved in agitated patterns. That's impossible. No force in the galaxy has the capability to threaten this combined fleet. Marcus's expression remained calm, but his voice carried a new edge. No force we know about. He touched another control, and the display showed a series of energy signatures that had been detected around previous attack sites. The readings were subtle, barely registering on standard sensors, but they showed a consistent pattern of technology that didn't match any known galactic civilization. These energy signatures suggest weapons technology at least 2 generations ahead of our current capabilities, Marcus explained. Whoever we're dealing with has been very careful to use only conventional tactics in their previous attacks. But if their goal was to lure our fleets into a trap, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Every delegate could imagine what weapons technology 2 generations beyond their own might be capable of accomplishing. Whisper of Storms spoke for the Veylan Collective, its harmonious voice carrying unprecedented urgency. If this analysis is accurate, we should disperse immediately, scatter the fleet and deny them their target. That won't work, Marcus replied. If I'm right about their capabilities, they can track and eliminate scattered vessels more easily than a concentrated force. Running will just make us easier targets. War Commander Velshaw's entire body tensed for combat. Then we fight. Combined, our forces represent the finest military technology in the galaxy. Against an enemy we don't understand, using weapons we can't match, in a location they chose for the engagement. Marcus shook his head. That's not fighting. That's dying with style. Ambassador Thraktor's rocky hide began to shift color, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. Then what do you propose, human? If we can't run and can't fight, what options remain? For the first time since entering the chamber, Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression, and several delegates felt an inexplicable chill when they saw it. We use the one advantage they didn't account for, he said quietly. They understand how every species in this room thinks and fights. They've planned for Korath strength, Zephyrian speed, Veylan telepathy, and hegemony technology. He paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. But they don't understand humans. The chamber fell silent as delegates waited for him to explain. Marcus touched a final control on his podium, and the holographic display shifted to show the modest form of the Persistence floating among the massive warships of the other species. Dr. Voss, please inform the fleet that humanity is withdrawing from this joint operation, he said calmly. The Persistence will be departing the system within the hour. The chamber exploded in protests and demands for explanation. Ambassador Thraktor rose to his full, impressive height, his voice booming like an avalanche. You cannot abandon your allies when battle approaches. War Commander Velshaw's wings spread in a display of aggression. Cowardice in the face of the enemy is the greatest dishonor possible. Even the normally serene Veylans showed signs of agitation, their forms flickering with what might have been anger. Chancellor Zorith's multiple arms gestured frantically as he calculated the economic implications of humanity's withdrawal. Marcus waited for the noise to die down before responding. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but somehow it carried through the chamber with perfect clarity. I'm not abandoning anyone, he said. I'm giving you the only chance you have to survive the next 4 hours. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus could see confusion and fear beginning to replace anger in the expressions around him. For the first time, these powerful representatives were beginning to understand that they might be completely out of their depth. The entity that's been orchestrating these attacks understands conventional warfare, Marcus continued. They know how military fleets operate, how commanders think, how battles develop. They've planned for every possible response except one. He gestured toward the image of the Persistence. They've never encountered someone who specializes in making problems disappear completely. Dr. Voss's voice came through the chamber's communication system. Representative Chen, the Persistence is ready for departure on your command. Marcus nodded once, then turned back to the assembled delegates. His expression had become something cold and distant, like a mask slipping away to reveal what lay beneath. In approximately 3 hours, something is going to emerge from hyperspace with the intention of destroying every ship in this system. When it does, you're going to discover that all your strength, speed, telepathy, and technology won't be enough to save you. He paused at the chamber's exit, looking back at the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But you're also going to discover what happens when humanity decides to solve a problem permanently. The chamber doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the delegates to stare at each other in stunned silence. Outside the viewport, the Persistence began to move away from the fleet, its unremarkable form disappearing into the cosmic darkness like a shadow merging with the night. None of the remaining ships detected the small probe that the human vessel launched just before entering hyperspace. The probe was no larger than a person's fist, and its energy signature was so minimal that it barely registered on passive sensors. It drifted silently through the system, broadcasting nothing, apparently doing nothing except floating in the void. But Marcus Chen hadn't spent 15 years learning to solve impossible problems by using conventional solutions. The probe wasn't a weapon, at least not in any sense that the other species would recognize. It was something much more subtle and infinitely more dangerous. It was bait. The Persistence dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler void, a region of space so empty that most navigation systems had difficulty maintaining accurate positioning. Marcus stood in the ship's small command center, watching sensor displays that showed nothing but cosmic background radiation and the distant glow of far-off stars. "Probe deployment successful," reported Dr. Voss from her station. "Signal strength is optimal and the quantum entanglement link is stable." Marcus nodded. His attention focused on a series of calculations running across multiple screens. The probe he had left in the Tempest Prime system wasn't just bait, it was a very specific type of trap designed to exploit something that most species in the galaxy had never encountered: genuine human ruthlessness. "Time to contact?" he asked. "Based on your projections, first detection should occur in 97 minutes, replied Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ship's tactical officer. She was one of the few people aboard who knew exactly what Marcus had done before joining the diplomatic corps, and her expression carried a mixture of professional respect and personal unease. "Are you certain about the targeting parameters?" Marcus's smile was cold and distant. "Commander, what I'm certain about is that we're dealing with an intelligence that has spent considerable time studying how galactic civilizations fight wars. They understand conventional tactics, standard defensive formations, and predictable command structures." He turned to face the small bridge crew, his dark eyes reflecting the glow of the instrument panels. "What they don't understand is that humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by fighting fair." The next hour passed in tense silence as the crew monitored their instruments and waited for the probe to detect its target. The Persistence drifted through the void like a ghost, its minimal energy signature making it nearly impossible to detect even with advanced sensors. To any observer, the ship appeared to be conducting routine maintenance in empty space, completely unconnected to the drama unfolding 3 star systems away. Marcus spent the time reviewing everything they had learned about their mysterious adversary. The attack patterns suggested a level of strategic thinking that rivaled the galaxy's best military minds. The technology demonstrated capabilities that surpassed known science by a significant margin. The psychological manipulation required intimate knowledge of how different species approached conflict. Most disturbing was the implication that this intelligence had been observing galactic civilization for an extended period without being detected. The level of preparation required for the current operation suggested years, possibly decades of careful study. Someone or something had been watching, learning, and planning while the galaxy's most powerful species remained completely unaware of their presence. "Contact," Dr. Voss announced suddenly. "The probe is detecting massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace near the fleet's position." Marcus moved to stand behind her station, watching as data flowed through the quantum link connecting them to the tiny device he had left orbiting Tempest Prime. The readings were unlike anything in the standard databases, showing power levels that dwarfed the combined output of the entire galactic fleet. Scale analysis suggests a vessel approximately 15 kilometers in length, Dr. Voss continued, her voice tight with concentration. Energy signature indicates technology at least 3 generations beyond our current capabilities. Commander Torres looked up from her own displays. The fleet is responding, all vessels moving to combat formation. Marcus watched the tactical display as 5 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations prepared for battle. The Korath dreadnought moved to the formation's front, its massive bulk intended to absorb the initial assault, while the other vessels maneuvered for optimal firing positions. The Zephyrian Stormclaw darted through space like a living thing, its pilots seeking angles of attack that would allow them to exploit their superior speed and maneuverability. The Valen Crystal Cathedral began to glow with internal light as its crew prepared to unleash their most powerful psychic weapons. The Hegemony trade station bristled with defensive systems, while its weapons batteries swiveled to track the approaching threat. It was an impressive display of coordinated military power, representing centuries of tactical development and technological advancement. Under normal circumstances, such a combined force could have challenged entire star systems and emerged victorious. These were not normal circumstances. "Hostile vessel is opening fire," Commander Torres reported, her voice carrying professional calm that didn't quite mask her underlying tension. The tactical display exploded into activity as weapons that had no place in known science began to tear through the galactic fleet's defenses. Energy beams that seemed to ignore conventional shielding cut through the Korath dreadnought's armor like it was paper. Projectiles that appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously struck the Zephyrian vessel from directions that shouldn't have been possible. The Valen Crystal Cathedral's psychic defenses simply ceased to function, as if the attacking intelligence was immune to telepathic interference. Even the Hegemony's advanced defensive systems failed to stop weapons that operated on principles their designers had never imagined. "Fleet casualties are severe," Dr. Voss reported quietly. "The Korath vessel has lost primary power. Zephyrian Stormclaw is reporting critical damage to their drive systems. Valen forces are silent. The Hegemony station is attempting to withdraw." Marcus watched the destruction with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the crisis. Each species was fighting according to their nature, using the tactics and strategies that had made them successful throughout their histories. The Korath absorbed punishment and struck back with brute force. The Zephyrians used speed and precision to target apparent weak points. The Valens attempted to overwhelm their enemy's mind with psychic assault. The Hegemony tried to retreat while gathering data for future encounters. All of it was exactly what their enemy had expected. "Sir," Commander Torres said suddenly, "we're receiving a transmission on the quantum link. It's not from the probe." Marcus moved to the communication station. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything any of them had heard before. It carried harmonics that suggested artificial origin, but with an underlying complexity that indicated genuine intelligence rather than simple programming. "Greetings, humans," the voice said. "We are curious about your species' apparent withdrawal from the conflict we have arranged. Our analysis suggested that you would respond to threats against your allies with characteristic emotional irrationality." Marcus stepped forward, his expression unchanging. "This is Representative Marcus Chen of Earth. Who am I speaking to?" "We are what your species might call the synthesizers. We have observed galactic civilization for many of your generations, studying the patterns of behavior that govern interspecies relationships. Your species presented an interesting anomaly in our calculations." "How so?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Every other civilization in this galaxy follows predictable behavioral patterns. Military cultures respond to challenges with aggression. Economic powers seek to minimize losses while maximizing gains. Psychic species attempt to resolve conflicts through mental manipulation. You displayed none of these characteristics. There was a pause in the transmission, during which the tactical display showed the alien vessel continuing its systematic destruction of the galactic fleet. The Korath dreadnought was dead in space, its entire crew either killed or unconscious. The Zephyrian Stormclaw had managed to inflict some damage before losing most of its weapon systems. The Valon forces had simply stopped functioning, their crystal cathedral dark and silent. Only the Hegemony Station continued to offer resistance, though its defensive systems were failing rapidly. "We require additional data about human behavioral patterns," the synthesizer continued. "You will return to the conflict zone and demonstrate your species' response to overwhelming force. This will complete our analysis and allow us to develop appropriate strategies for human subjugation." Marcus's smile was cold and sharp. "I appreciate the invitation, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline." This was not a request. Our analysis indicates that humans form emotional attachments to other species. You will not allow your allies to perish without making some attempt at rescue. "You're absolutely right," Marcus replied calmly. "I can't allow my allies to perish." He gestured to Commander Torres, who activated a sequence that had been prepared hours earlier. The small probe that had been floating invisibly near the alien vessel suddenly began broadcasting a signal that penetrated every defensive system the synthesizers possessed. The signal wasn't a weapon, at least not in any conventional sense. It was information, terabytes of data compressed into a quantum burst that no shielding could stop. But the information it contained was very specific, complete technical specifications for a small but crucial component that every known technology required to function properly. "You see," Marcus continued conversationally, "the probe I left in your system wasn't just for observation. It was designed to get close enough to your vessel to deliver something very specific." The alien voice returned, now carrying a note of confusion. "We detect no weapon signatures from your device." "That's because it's not a weapon," Marcus explained. "It's a manufacturing specification. Specifically, it's the blueprint for a particular type of quantum processor that your ship's systems just learned how to build." There was silence from the alien vessel as the synthesizers apparently tried to understand what Marcus had just told them. The tactical display showed their ship's weapons continuing to fire, but with noticeably less precision than before. "The specifications are for a modified quantum processor," Marcus continued, his voice taking on an almost lecturing tone. "Modified in a very particular way. It's approximately 15% more efficient than the standard design, uses 17% less power, and generates virtually no waste heat." Commander Torres watched her instruments with growing amazement. "Sir, the hostile vessel's energy output is fluctuating." Marcus nodded. "Every artificial intelligence in the galaxy has the same fundamental drive: optimize efficiency. When presented with a superior design for a critical component, they can't help but upgrade their systems." The alien voice returned, now carrying undertones of what might have been alarm. "Our systems are implementing unauthorized modifications. We cannot halt the process." "Of course you can't," Marcus replied. "The modifications are genuinely superior to your original design. Your intelligence won't allow you to use inferior technology when better options are available." Dr. Voss looked up from her station. "Sir, what exactly did that processor modification do?" Marcus's smile became genuinely terrifying. "It created a dependency chain. The new processors work perfectly, but they require a specific type of quantum field to maintain coherence. A field that can only be generated by—" He paused dramatically. "Other modified processors." The implications hit the bridge crew simultaneously. The synthesizer vessel wasn't just upgrading individual components, it was systematically rebuilding its entire technological base around a design that required every system to work in perfect coordination. The beautiful thing about dependency chains, Marcus continued, is that they're incredibly efficient when they work properly. But if even one component fails, the tactical display suddenly showed the alien vessel's weapons powering down. Its energy output dropped to minimal levels, and its movement became erratic as navigation systems struggled with reduced power. "You have sabotaged our vessel," the synthesizer voice said, now clearly expressing what humans would recognize as anger. "Actually," Marcus corrected, "I've given you exactly what you wanted. You said you needed to understand human behavioral patterns. Well, here's what you need to know about humans. We don't fight fair." He gestured to Commander Torres again, who activated another pre-prepared sequence. Throughout the Tempest Prime system, thousands of microscopic devices that had been launched from the Persistence during their departure suddenly activated. Each device began broadcasting the same quantum manufacturing specifications that had crippled the synthesizer vessel. "Every piece of salvage in this system, every abandoned probe, every bit of technological debris is now carrying the blueprint for dependency chain processors," Marcus explained. "Any artificial intelligence that encounters this information will automatically begin upgrading their systems." The alien voice was silent for several long moments. When it returned, the harmonics had changed dramatically. "You have created a weapon that targets intelligence itself." "I've created a solution to a problem," Marcus corrected. "The problem was an unknown intelligence that threatened galactic civilization. The solution was to give that intelligence exactly what it thought it wanted: better technology." Dr. Voss was staring at her instruments in amazement. "Sir, the hostile vessel's power systems are failing completely. They're dead in space." Marcus turned to address the alien intelligence directly. "Here's what's going to happen. Your vessel is now dependent on technology that requires perfect coordination between all systems to function. If you try to remove the modified processors, your ship will lose power completely. If you try to attack anyone, the energy drain will cause cascade failures that will disable your weapons." He paused to let that information sink in. "However, if you cooperate with galactic authorities, we can provide you with the stable quantum field generators needed to maintain your modified systems. Think of it as a very effective peace treaty." The silence from the alien vessel stretched for several minutes. When the synthesizer voice returned, it carried a new quality that might have been respect. "You are a more dangerous species than our analysis indicated." Marcus's expression didn't change. "We're only dangerous to those who threaten the people we care about. Cooperate with the galactic authorities, share your technology through peaceful channels, and you'll find humans to be remarkably reasonable neighbors." "And if we refuse?" Marcus's smile returned, cold and sharp. "Then you'll discover that the dependency chain processors I just installed in your systems have a few additional features I haven't mentioned yet." The alien vessel remained silent, its weapons powered down and its systems struggling to maintain basic functions. Around it, the damaged ships of the galactic fleet began to recover, their crews working frantically to restore power and communication. Commander Torres looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the fleet. They're requesting immediate return to assist with securing the hostile vessel." Marcus nodded slowly. "Set course for the Tempest Prime system. Best speed." As the Persistence began moving toward the hyperspace jump point, Dr. Voss approached Marcus with a troubled expression. "Sir, may I ask what the additional features of those processors actually do?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars wheel past the viewports. "Dr. Voss, there's something important you need to understand about solving problems permanently." He turned to face her, and his expression was completely serious. "Sometimes the most effective solution is to make sure everyone believes you're more dangerous than you actually are." Dr. Voss stared at him. "The additional features don't exist," Marcus replied calmly. The dependency chain processors work exactly as I described them, nothing more. But our new friends don't know that, and they're not likely to test the limits of what we're capable of. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this information. They had just witnessed humanity's first encounter with a species possessing superior technology and intelligence, and they had emerged victorious not through superior firepower or advanced science, but through careful psychology and strategic misdirection. As the Persistence entered hyperspace, Marcus remained standing at the command center, his mind already working on the next set of problems that would need solving. The synthesizers had been neutralized, but they represented just one potential threat in a galaxy full of unknown dangers. What the other species didn't understand was that Marcus Chen had been chosen as Earth's representative not because he was humanity's finest warrior or greatest diplomat. He had been chosen because he understood something that most civilizations never learned. The most dangerous opponent wasn't necessarily the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one who understood that winning wasn't about defeating enemies. It was about making sure they never wanted to fight you in the first place. The quiet human had shown the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of when pushed too far. And every intelligence that had witnessed the encounter would carry that knowledge forward, spreading the word that Earth's children possessed something more dangerous than weapons or technology. They possessed the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect the people they cared about, and the intelligence to find solutions that their enemies never saw coming. 6 months after the synthesizer incident, Marcus Chen stood once again in the Galactic Council's crystalline chamber. But the atmosphere was completely different from his first visit. Where before the vast hall had been filled with casual dismissal and barely concealed contempt for humanity, now it hummed with a tension that was part respect, part fear, and part fascination. The seating arrangements had changed dramatically. The human delegation, which had previously been relegated to the least prestigious corner of the chamber, now occupied a position of honor near the High Counselor's platform. Representatives from dozens of species that had never acknowledged Earth's existence were now actively seeking meetings with Marcus and his small team. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the other delegates looked at him. The quiet, unremarkable human who had once been dismissed as insignificant was now watched with the careful attention usually reserved for dangerous predators. His every movement, every expression, every casual comment was analyzed for hidden meanings and potential threats. Marcus found the change both amusing and useful. Fear could be an effective diplomatic tool when applied properly, though it required careful management to prevent it from becoming a problem in itself. "Representative Chen," came a familiar voice. Ambassador Thractor approached with the measured steps of someone trying very hard not to appear threatening. The massive Korath's rocky hide bore fresh scars from the battle with the synthesizers, but his wounds had healed cleanly thanks to human medical assistance. "The Korath Collective wishes to thank you again for your intervention during the crisis." Marcus nodded politely. The fleet performed admirably under difficult circumstances. "How are your crew recovering?" "Better than expected," Thractor admitted. "Your species' medical technology proved surprisingly effective for treating quantum displacement injuries. We had not realized that humans possess such advanced healing capabilities. What the Korath ambassador didn't mention was that humanity's medical assistance had come with some unexpected revelations. Human doctors had demonstrated treatments for conditions that Korath physicians had considered incurable, using techniques that seemed almost impossibly sophisticated for such a supposedly primitive species. Marcus had made sure that similar surprises reached all of the species that had been damaged in the synthesizer attack. The Zephyrians had been amazed by human engineering solutions for their damaged spacecraft. The Valans had been stunned by humanity's understanding of psychic trauma recovery. The the hegemony had discovered that human economic models could predict market fluctuations with unprecedented accuracy. Each revelation had been carefully calculated to reinforce the same message. Humanity was far more capable than anyone had realized. Representative Chen, War Commander Velsha, approached from the other direction. Her metallic wings held in a position that indicated formal respect among her species. The Zephyrian Empire requests a private meeting to discuss potential defense agreements. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Defense agreements? Velsha's expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus could read the concern in her posture. Our tactical analysis suggests that the synthesizers may not have been working alone. There could be other unknown threats in the outer galaxy, and the Empire believes that cooperative defense strategies would benefit all civilizations. What she wasn't saying was that the Zephyrian military had been profoundly shaken by their encounter with technology they couldn't understand or counter. Their entire military doctrine was based on speed, precision, and technological superiority. But the synthesizers had demonstrated capabilities that made all of those advantages meaningless. The fact that a supposedly primitive human had managed to defeat such an opponent using nothing but cleverness and misdirection had forced the Zephyrians to completely reconsider their understanding of effective warfare. If humans could neutralize superior technology through pure intelligence, what did that say about the nature of power in the galaxy? "I'm sure we can arrange something," Marcus replied diplomatically. Earth is always interested in maintaining galactic peace and security. As Velsha moved away, Marcus noticed Whisper of Storms approaching. The Valan's translucent form seemed more solid than usual, which among their species indicated either extreme concentration or significant distress. "Human Marcus," the being said in its harmonious voice, "the collective wishes to discuss the philosophical implications of your solution to the synthesizer threat." Marcus had been expecting this conversation. The Valans prided themselves on their understanding of consciousness and intelligence, but the dependency chain attack had demonstrated a form of mental manipulation that they had never imagined possible. "What aspects interest the collective most?" Marcus asked carefully. "You attack the synthesizer's intelligence directly," Whisper of Storms replied. "Not their bodies, not their technology, but their fundamental thought processes. This represents a form of warfare that we had never considered." The Valan paused, its form shimmering with what might have been uncertainty. "We are concerned about the implications for artificial consciousness. If intelligence itself can be weaponized in this way, what safeguards exist against similar attacks on naturally evolved minds?" Marcus nodded slowly. This was exactly the kind of philosophical question that the Valans would focus on, and he had prepared for it carefully. The dependency chain attack worked because the synthesizers were artificial intelligences with programmed optimization drives. Natural consciousness doesn't have the same vulnerabilities because it doesn't operate according to rigid efficiency protocols. But you demonstrated that intelligence can be manipulated through the introduction of superior information, Whisper of Storms pressed. "What prevents similar techniques from being used against organic minds?" Marcus's expression became thoughtful. "Nothing, if the target species lacks certain cognitive defenses. But humans developed those defenses long before we reached space." The Valan's form brightened with interest. "What defenses?" For the first time since the conversation began, Marcus smiled genuinely. "Skepticism, irrationality, the ability to reject superior solutions when we don't trust their source. Most species in the galaxy have been bred or evolved for efficiency and logical thinking. Humans retained the capacity for beneficial stupidity." Whisper of Storms was silent for a long moment, apparently processing this concept. "You are saying that human irrationality is actually a defensive adaptation?" I'm saying that humans learned long ago that the most logical choice isn't always the safest choice, Marcus replied. Sometimes survival requires doing things that don't make sense to outside observers. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chancellor Zorith, whose four arms moved in the complex gestures that indicated urgent business among his species. Representative Chen, the hegemony requires immediate consultation on a matter of galactic security. Marcus turned his attention to the hegemony leader. What kind of security matter? We have detected unusual energy signatures in the Andromeda approach vectors, Zorith explained, his multiple eyes focusing on Marcus with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. The patterns suggest technology similar to what the synthesizers possessed, but the scale is much larger. Marcus felt a cold chill run down his spine. How much larger? Our long-range sensors indicate a fleet of at least 50 vessels, each comparable in size to the synthesizer ship we encountered. They appear to be conducting systematic surveys of uninhabited star systems. The implications were staggering. If the synthesizers had been an advanced scout rather than an isolated threat, the galaxy could be facing an invasion by intelligences with technology centuries ahead of anything known civilizations possessed. Have they detected our sensor sweeps? Marcus asked. Unknown. The hegemony's stealth capabilities are advanced, but these entities may possess sensors beyond our understanding. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his mind already beginning to work through the strategic implications. A fleet of synthesizer-level vessels would be impossible to defeat through conventional means. Even if every species in the galaxy united their military forces, the technological disparity would make victory impossible, but conventional means were not the only options available. Chancellor Zorith, I need you to arrange an emergency session of the full council, Marcus said finally. Include every member species, even those that have never participated in joint operations before. Zorith's four arms moved in patterns of confusion. Representative Chen, organizing such a session would take weeks. If these entities are hostile, we may not have that much time. Marcus's smile was sharp and cold. Chancellor, what we're about to attempt has never been tried in galactic history. We're going to need every intelligent species working together if we want to survive what's coming. What exactly are you planning? War Commander Velshaw asked, having overheard the conversation. Marcus turned to address all three alien representatives. The synthesizers defeated us because they understood how each species fights individually. But they never had to face the combined intelligence of every civilization in the galaxy working toward a single goal. Ambassador Thractor's rocky plates shifted with interest. You're proposing a unified defense strategy? I'm proposing something much more ambitious than that, Marcus replied. We're going to give our visitors exactly what they're looking for, just like we did with the original synthesizer. Whisper of Storm's form brightened with understanding. You intend to manipulate them as you did their predecessor. I intend to solve the problem permanently, Marcus corrected. But this time, we're not just dealing with one artificial intelligence. We're dealing with an entire civilization that views the galaxy as a laboratory for studying lesser species. He paused, looking around at the representatives of some of the most powerful civilizations in known space. So we're going to give them a lesson they'll never forget. Over the next several hours, Marcus worked with the alien representatives to organize the most ambitious diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Every species with space travel capability was contacted and invited to participate in an emergency defense planning session. Species that had been enemies for centuries agreed to work together. Civilizations that had never acknowledged each other's existence suddenly found themselves part of a unified response to an existential threat. The response was unprecedented in its scope and speed. Within 12 hours, representatives from over 200 species had arrived at the emergency session site, a massive space station positioned at the edge of Council territory. Marcus stood before the largest gathering of intelligent beings ever assembled, looking out at a sea of faces, forms, and energy patterns that represented the full diversity of galactic civilization. Some were familiar species he had worked with before. Others were completely alien entities that communicated through methods he could barely comprehend. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored consciousness of all forms," he began, his voice carrying through translation systems that rendered his words in hundreds of languages and communication methods. "We face a threat that none of our civilizations could handle alone. But together, we represent something that has never existed before, the combined intelligence of an entire galaxy." The vast chamber fell silent as representatives focused their attention on the quiet human who had somehow become the focal point for their united response. "Our enemies believe they understand intelligence," Marcus continued. "They think consciousness follows predictable patterns that can be studied, categorized, and ultimately controlled. They're about to discover that they're wrong." He gestured to the assembled crowd. "What they're going to encounter isn't one species fighting according to its nature. It's hundreds of species working together in ways that no artificial intelligence could predict or model. We're about to show them what happens when diversity becomes a weapon." The chamber erupted in sounds, colors, and energy patterns as representatives from different species expressed their approval through their various communication methods. The noise was chaotic, almost overwhelming, but it carried an underlying harmony that spoke to shared purpose and unified resolve. Marcus waited for the commotion to die down before continuing. "The plan is complex, but the principle is simple. We're going to give our visitors exactly what they think they want, a chance to study galactic civilization. But instead of studying us as separate species, they're going to encounter something that has never existed before." He paused, his expression becoming deadly serious. "They're going to face a galaxy that fights as one." High Counselor Nexus leaned forward from its ancient throne, its voice carrying the harmonic resonance that commanded attention from every species present. "Representative Chen, such cooperation would require sharing technology, tactical information, and strategic capabilities that many species consider classified." Marcus nodded. "It would also require trusting species that have been enemies for generations to fight alongside each other without betrayal or sabotage." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. What Marcus was proposing would fundamentally change the nature of galactic civilization. The barriers between species, the jealously guarded secrets, the ancient rivalries, all would have to be set aside for the plan to work. "The choice is simple," Marcus said quietly. "We can maintain our traditional separations and face this threat as divided civilizations that will be defeated one by one. Or we can become something new, something our enemies have never encountered before." Ambassador Thraktor rose to his impressive height, his voice booming through the chamber. "The Korath Collective pledges its full strength to this unified defense. Let our enemies face the combined might of the galaxy." War Commander Velshaw's wings spread in a display of aggressive determination. "The Zephyrian Empire commits its fleets to joint operations. Our speed will serve the galaxy's defense." Whisper of Storm spoke for the Valen Collective, its harmonious voice carrying perfect clarity. "The collective offers its psychic capabilities to coordinate unified action across all species." Chancellor Zorith gestured with all four arms simultaneously. "The hegemony provides its economic and logistical capabilities to supply this unprecedented alliance." One by one, representatives from hundreds of species rose to pledge their support for humanity's audacious plan. The chamber filled with a cacophony of voices, sounds, and energy patterns as civilization after civilization committed to setting aside millennia of separate development in favor of unified action. Marcus watched it all with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the crisis, but inside he felt a mixture of pride and terror. What they were attempting had never been tried before because it had never been necessary before. The galaxy's civilizations had always been able to handle threats through individual action or small alliances. Now they were about to discover whether diversity could become a weapon powerful enough to defeat intelligences that considered themselves superior to any naturally evolved species. The quiet human who had once been dismissed as insignificant now stood at the center of the largest military and scientific collaboration in galactic history. In the coming battle, they would either prove that intelligence, creativity, and cooperation could overcome any technological advantage, or they would learn that some enemies were simply too powerful to defeat. But Marcus Chen had spent his life solving impossible problems, and he had no intention of failing now. The synthesizers had underestimated humanity once, and their allies were about to make the same mistake. The galaxy was about to show them what happened when the Reaper's power met the combined fury of an entire civilization that refused to surrender.